History is not written by the kind. It is written by the unbreakable. If you strip away the comforting lies humanity tells itself, what remains is a cold record of power, survival, and dominance. Empires did not rise because men were gentle. Kingdoms were not built by those seeking approval. They were forged by minds that refused to collapse under pressure. From the blood-soaked battlefields of ancient Rome to the ruthless courts of Renaissance Italy, the world has always belonged to those who mastered one thing above all others: their minds. Niccolo Machiavelli understood this better than most. While others preached virtue and morality, he studied power. He watched rulers rise and fall, not because they lacked goodness, but because they lacked mental strength. He saw the brutal truth of human nature. People are unpredictable, self-interested, easily manipulated, and quick to betray. And in such a world, the greatest weapon is not wealth, influence, or brute force. It is the mind that cannot be broken. Look closely at history's darkest moments, and you will see the same pattern repeated again and again. Civilizations collapse. Betrayal spreads through alliances. Wars erupt without warning. The strong devour the weak, and the weak cry out for mercy that never arrives. This is not pessimism. This is reality. The world does not reward fragility. It tests you relentlessly. Pressure, humiliation, rejection, loss. These are the furnaces that shape the human mind. Most people crumble when the heat rises. They search for comfort. They retreat into excuses. They blame fate, society, or the cruelty of others. But a small minority do something different. They harden, they observe, they adapt. Instead of asking why the world is unfair, they accept the game for what it is and learn how to dominate it. An unbreakable mind is not born in comfort. It is forged in darkness. It emerges when a person stops expecting sympathy and begins cultivating control. Control over emotion, control over reaction, control over perception. When chaos surrounds them, they do not panic. When betrayal appears, they do not collapse. They remain silent, calculating, and steady. This is the psychology of power that Machiavelli observed in rulers who endured. They were not always the most loved. Often, they were not the most moral, but they possessed something far more dangerous: mental sovereignty. No insult could shake them. No crisis could paralyze them. Their minds were fortresses, and inside those fortresses lived clarity, patience, and ruthless discipline. The modern world tries to hide these truths behind comfort and distraction. It encourages softness, emotional dependence, and the illusion that life should be easy. But history tells a different story. Life has always been a test of resilience. Every era produces storms designed to reveal who will collapse and who will endure. The question is simple: when pressure arrives, and it will your mind fracture or will it sharpen? Because in a world governed by power and perception, the man who masters his mind becomes something rare, something difficult to control, something almost impossible to defeat. Before we go further, I want you to mark this moment, not with noise, but with intent. Go to the comments and write one sentence that declares your refusal to be weak. Write, "My mind cannot be conquered." When you write it, you are not just leaving a comment, you are making a decision. Because everything that follows in this journey is about forging the kind of mind that history respects, the mind that survives when everything else collapses. When you are ready, we move to the first lesson, the lesson that transforms suffering from an enemy into a weapon. Lesson number 1, the forge of suffering. The first secret of an unbreakable mind is one most people spend their entire lives running from: pain. The modern world teaches you to escape it, numb it, distract yourself from it. Comfort has become a religion, and weakness its silent disciple. But history tells a far darker truth. Every powerful mind that has ever existed was shaped in suffering. Not comfort, not praise, suffering. Machiavelli understood that hardship is not a curse placed upon a man's life. It is the furnace that reveals what he truly is. When pressure tightens around you, when humiliation cuts into your pride, when life strips away everything you thought would protect you, that is when the mask falls away. Most people break in that moment. They search desperately for sympathy. They blame fate. They curse the cruelty of the world. But the rare mind does something colder. It studies the pain. It watches it carefully, the way a strategist studies the battlefield. Because pain, when understood correctly, is not your enemy. It is your greatest instructor. The most dangerous individuals in history were not raised in endless comfort. They were hardened by adversity. Julius Caesar faced betrayal and exile before conquering Rome. Napoleon rose from obscurity through relentless struggle. Even the most feared rulers of Machiavelli's time were not born powerful. They were forged by conflict. Each humiliation sharpened their instincts. Each loss strengthened their discipline. Each betrayal taught them the reality of human nature. This is the brutal pattern of power. Suffering creates clarity. When life is easy, people remain naive. They trust blindly. They reveal their emotions too quickly. They assume loyalty where none exists. But suffering strips away those illusions. It teaches you to observe people more carefully. It trains you to remain silent while others reveal themselves. It forces your mind to adapt, evolve, and become far more dangerous than it was before. Most men collapse because they interpret pain incorrectly. They see it as proof of their weakness. They treat adversity as something personal, something unfair, something that should not exist. But the unbreakable mind sees something entirely different. It sees training. Every insult becomes a lesson in emotional control. Every failure becomes a lesson in strategy. Every betrayal becomes a lesson in human psychology. When you stop resisting pain and start analyzing it, something extraordinary happens. The very force that was supposed to break you begins strengthening you. Your tolerance for pressure increases. Your reactions slow down. Your emotions become quieter. Eventually, the storms that once terrified you begin to feel almost ordinary. And when the world realizes that pressure no longer shakes you, it loses one of its greatest weapons against you. There is a reason the strongest minds often appear cold. It is not because they lack feeling. It is because they have already walked through fire. They have learned that emotional chaos is a liability. They understand that the world respects control more than vulnerability. When a man has suffered enough without collapsing, something inside him changes permanently. He becomes difficult to intimidate. Manipulation no longer works on him. The threats that paralyze others barely register in his mind. His suffering has already trained him for worse. This is the psychological armor Machiavelli admired in powerful leaders. They did not crumble under pressure because pressure had become familiar. Pain was no longer a punishment. It had become preparation. If you truly want to build an unbreakable mind, you must stop asking life to be easier. That request is the language of weakness. Instead, you must learn to see hardship as your forge. Every difficulty is shaping you into something sharper, calmer, and more controlled. While others complain about the cruelty of their circumstances, you quietly become stronger than those circumstances. While others collapse under pressure, you learn to stand still inside it. Over time, this difference becomes enormous. The world begins to divide itself into two groups, those who are ruled by pain and those who have learned to weaponize it. Right now, I want you to anchor this lesson into your mind. Go to the comments and write a phrase that declares your relationship with adversity. Write, "Pain sharpens my mind." When you write it, understand what you are accepting. You are stepping onto a path very few people have the courage to walk. The path where suffering is no longer feared, but mastered. Because once pain becomes your teacher instead of your enemy, your mind begins transforming into something the world struggles to control. And that transformation leads to the second lesson, the discipline of silence, the weapon most people underestimate until it is too late. Lesson number 2, the tyranny of silence. The second lesson of an unbreakable mind is a weapon so simple that most people overlook it entirely. Silence. In a world addicted to noise, silence becomes power. People talk endlessly about their plans, their emotions, their frustrations, their victories. They reveal their weaknesses without realizing it. They expose their intentions before the battle even begins. Machiavelli watched this pattern centuries ago in the courts of princes and kings. The loudest men were rarely the most powerful. They were predictable, easy to read, easy to manipulate. The real strategists spoke very little. They observed everything. Because every word you release into the world gives others information about you. Your fears, your desires, your insecurities, your ambitions. Words are windows into the mind, and once someone sees inside, they can begin shaping your behavior without you ever noticing. Most people betray themselves through conversation. They rush to defend their pride when insulted. They explain their motives when questioned. They seek validation by sharing their dreams with anyone willing to listen. But the unbreakable mind understands something colder. Information is currency. Every piece of yourself you reveal reduces your advantage. When people know what you want, they can control you. When they know what angers you, they can provoke you. When they know what scares you, they can threaten you. Silence removes these weapons from their hands. It creates uncertainty, and uncertainty makes others uneasy. They begin projecting their own assumptions onto you, trying to fill the quiet with guesses. The silent individual becomes difficult to read, difficult to predict, and therefore difficult to manipulate. History quietly confirms this principle. The most effective rulers were rarely the ones who spoke the most. They listened, they watched, they allowed others to reveal their intentions first. Machiavelli described this as the art of controlling perception. When you remain silent, people underestimate you. They mistake restraint for ignorance. They assume your calm means you lack ambition. This illusion becomes your advantage. While others compete for attention, you gather information. While they reveal their strategies, you refine yours. Silence is not weakness, it is concealed power. It allows you to remain emotionally neutral, while everyone else is reacting, arguing, and exposing themselves. And in any environment where power is being contested, the person who understands more always wins. Silence also trains something deeper inside you: control, emotional control. Most people speak impulsively. They react to anger with words. They respond to pressure with explanations. They defend themselves even when no defense is required. But the unbreakable mind does something different. It pauses, it evaluates, it chooses words carefully, or chooses not to speak at all. This pause gives you an advantage that impulsive people never possess: clarity. You begin seeing situations more objectively. You notice patterns in human behavior. You observe who seeks attention, who manipulates, who lies, who reveals too much. Silence sharpens your awareness, because your mind is no longer busy defending your ego. It is studying the environment. Over time, this discipline transforms how people perceive you. The quiet individual in the room becomes mysterious. Others begin wondering what you are thinking. They become cautious around you because they cannot predict your reactions. In the psychology of power, unpredictability creates influence. When people cannot easily read your mind, they hesitate before confronting you. And hesitation is often enough to shift the balance of control. Right now, anchor this lesson into your identity. Go to the comments and write the phrase that marks the beginning of your discipline. Write, "Silence is my power." When you write it, remember what it means. It means you are no longer participating in the endless noise that weakens most minds. You are learning to watch before you act, to listen before you speak, to understand before you reveal. Because once silence becomes your weapon, the world begins showing you its secrets. And those secrets lead to the next lesson, the art of emotional detachment, where control over your feelings becomes control over your life. Lesson number 3. The funeral of your emotions. The third lesson of an unbreakable mind is one that most people will never accept because it demands something terrifying: the burial of emotional weakness. Human beings are creatures of feeling. Anger rises when pride is wounded. Fear appears when security is threatened. Desire emerges when the mind sees pleasure within reach. These emotions are natural, but they are also the chains that keep most people controlled. Machiavelli observed this clearly while studying rulers, soldiers, and conspirators. The people who lost power were rarely those who lacked intelligence. They were the ones who allowed emotion to dictate their actions. Rage led them into reckless decisions. Fear forced them into hesitation. Attachment blinded them to betrayal. Emotion became the doorway through which their enemies entered. The unbreakable mind understands a colder principle. Emotions must be mastered, or they will master you. This does not mean you become an empty machine. It means you develop authority over your inner world. Most people live the opposite way. They wake up and allow their mood to determine their behavior. If someone insults them, they react instantly. If a situation feels uncomfortable, they retreat. If someone flatters them, they become trusting. Their decisions are constantly manipulated by emotional triggers, and the world is full of people who know exactly how to press those triggers. Manipulators, rivals, opportunists, they all rely on emotional reactions to control others. Anger clouds judgment. Fear freezes movement. Desperation destroys strategy. Once a person loses emotional control, their opponent no longer needs strength. The battle is already won. Look at the darkest moments in history and you will see this pattern repeated. Leaders destroyed themselves through pride. Generals lost wars through panic. Kings were betrayed because they trusted affection over caution. Emotional vulnerability has always been the quiet weakness behind great collapses. Machiavelli warned rulers that love is unreliable because human loyalty shifts with circumstance. People admire strength, but they follow power, and power requires emotional discipline. The ruler who reacts impulsively reveals insecurity. The strategist who remains calm while chaos erupts becomes impossible to intimidate. When others see that nothing easily disturbs your mind, they begin to treat you differently. They hesitate before provoking you. They reconsider before deceiving you. Your emotional stability becomes a psychological weapon. The burial of emotional weakness begins with observation. You must start watching your reactions the way a scientist studies an experiment. Notice how your body responds to insult. Notice the tension when someone challenges your authority. Notice the urge to defend yourself when misunderstood. These reactions are not random. They are predictable patterns that others can exploit. The moment you become aware of them, you begin reclaiming control. Instead of reacting automatically, you pause. Instead of defending your pride, you observe the situation with distance. This pause is the birthplace of emotional sovereignty. It separates the impulsive mind from the strategic one, and in the silent space between stimulus and response, power begins to grow. Over time, this discipline transforms the way you experience conflict. Insults stop feeling like personal attacks. They become information about the person delivering them. Manipulation attempts stop triggering emotional defense. They become signals revealing someone's strategy. Even betrayal begins to look different. Instead of collapsing under disappointment, you see it as confirmation of human nature. This shift is dark, but it is also liberating. When you stop expecting loyalty, you stop feeling shocked when it disappears. When you stop demanding fairness from the world, you stop feeling outraged when injustice appears. Emotional detachment removes the illusions that cause suffering. And once illusions disappear, clarity replaces them. Clarity is dangerous. It allows you to make decisions based on reality instead of emotion. Imagine standing in a room where everyone else is reacting impulsively, arguing, defending their pride, trying to win approval, while you remain calm and observant. Their emotions become predictable patterns moving across the surface of the situation. You begin seeing opportunities others miss. You notice who is insecure, who is desperate, who is seeking validation. These insights allow you to navigate power dynamics with surgical precision. While others fight emotional battles, you quietly control the direction of events. This emotional discipline also protects you from manipulation disguised as compassion. Many people attempt to control others through guilt, sympathy, or moral pressure. They appeal to emotion because logic would expose their intentions. The unbreakable mind recognizes these tactics instantly. Instead of responding emotionally, you evaluate the situation with cold neutrality. Does this person deserve loyalty? Does this situation require sympathy? Is this reaction strategic or simply emotional habit? When you begin asking these questions, emotional manipulation loses its power over you. You remain composed while others reveal their motives in the desperation of their reactions. But this transformation requires a sacrifice. You must abandon the comfort of emotional indulgence, complaining, reacting impulsively, seeking validation. These habits must die. In their place grows something far more powerful: calm awareness. The ability to stand inside chaos without losing clarity. The ability to hear criticism without losing direction. The ability to experience pressure without collapsing into panic. This is the funeral of emotional weakness. Not a destruction of humanity, but a refinement of it. Right now, mark this transformation. Go to the comments and write the phrase that represents your commitment to emotional discipline. Write, "My emotions obey my mind." When you write it, understand what you are declaring. You are rejecting the weakness that allows others to control you. You are choosing the harder path, the path where feelings exist, but they do not rule. Because once your emotions become servants instead of masters, your mind begins evolving into something far more difficult to defeat. And from this cold clarity emerges the next lesson: the art of psychological invisibility, where true power moves quietly while the world remains distracted. Lesson number 4. The power of invisible dominion. One of the darkest truths about power is that the most dangerous individuals are rarely the most visible ones. The world is full of loud people trying to prove their strength, arguing, boasting, displaying their ambitions like trophies. They believe power must be seen to exist. But Machiavelli observed something far more unsettling. True power often moves in silence. It operates behind the surface, hidden from the attention of those who mistake visibility for dominance. The rulers who survived the brutal games of politics were not always the most aggressive men in the room. Often, they were the most patient, the ones who watched carefully while others revealed their intentions. They understood that attention is a double-edged weapon. The moment you become visible as a threat, people begin organizing against you. But when you remain underestimated, you gain something priceless: freedom to act. Most people sabotage themselves by craving recognition. They want their intelligence acknowledged. They want their strength admired. They want the world to notice their ambitions. This hunger exposes them. It makes them predictable. When others see your desire for validation, they can manipulate you through praise or criticism. They know exactly where your ego lives, and they know how to touch it. But the individual practicing invisible dominion refuses to participate in this performance. He does not rush to display his abilities. He does not seek approval through constant explanation. He allows others to underestimate him. In fact, he quietly encourages it. Because when people believe you are harmless, they lower their defenses. They reveal their plans without realizing they are being studied. This principle appears again and again in history's darker corridors of power. Advisors who controlled kingdoms without sitting on the throne. Strategists who influenced entire wars while their enemies underestimated them. Even in Machiavelli's time, the most effective operators were not always the kings themselves, but the minds guiding events from the shadows. They understood something most people cannot accept. Power does not always need recognition to exist. In fact, recognition often weakens it. When the spotlight shines on you, every rival begins calculating how to bring you down. But when you operate quietly, gathering information and influencing events without drawing attention, you become far more difficult to oppose. Invisible dominion begins with restraint. You stop revealing every idea that enters your mind. You stop correcting every misunderstanding people have about you. You stop trying to win every argument or prove every point. Instead, you allow situations to unfold while you observe. This restraint confuses many people because they expect immediate reactions. They expect emotional responses. When they don't receive them, they begin filling the silence with their own assumptions. Some will underestimate you, others will overlook you entirely. Both reactions serve your advantage, because while they are busy evaluating the noise around them, you are quietly studying the structure of the environment itself. Information becomes your greatest asset in this stage. The less you reveal about yourself, the more others reveal about themselves. People naturally talk about their frustrations, their ambitions, their resentments. They expose who they trust and who they fear. They reveal their insecurities through casual conversation. Most listeners treat these details as meaningless chatter, but the strategic mind collects them like pieces of a puzzle. Every small observation adds to your understanding of how people behave under pressure. Over time, you begin recognizing patterns. You can predict reactions before they happen. You know who will panic, who will betray, who will compete for attention. This knowledge creates quiet influence, because once you understand people deeply enough, guiding outcomes becomes far easier than forcing them. Another advantage of invisibility is psychological distance. When you are not constantly defending your reputation or proving your strength, your mind remains calm. You are not distracted by ego battles. While others waste energy protecting their pride, you conserve your attention for strategy. This calmness allows you to see situations more objectively. You notice alliances forming. You sense tensions building beneath polite conversations. You detect manipulation before it fully reveals itself. In the language of power, awareness is dominance. The person who understands the structure of a situation controls it long before anyone realizes control exists. Eventually, people begin noticing something unusual. Situations seem to move according to your presence, even when you say very little. Conflicts resolve in ways that benefit you. Opportunities appear where others expected obstacles. Rivals struggle to predict your actions because you reveal so little about your thinking. The mystery surrounding you becomes its own form of authority. People respect what they cannot fully understand, and in that uncertainty, your influence quietly expands. Right now, anchor this lesson in your identity. Go to the comments and write the phrase that represents this silent power. Write, "Power moves in silence." When you write it, remember what it means. It means you are no longer seeking attention as proof of strength. You are learning to move quietly while others reveal themselves. You are learning to observe before acting, to influence without announcing, to dominate without display. Because the most dangerous minds in history were not always the ones standing in the spotlight. They were the ones shaping events from the shadows. And once you master invisible dominion, the next lesson becomes inevitable. The discipline of ruthless self-control, where your habits become stronger than temptation, and your will becomes stronger than circumstance. Lesson number 5. The execution of weak habits. There is a quiet execution that must take place inside every mind that seeks real power. It does not involve weapons or violence. It is far colder than that. It is the deliberate destruction of your weakest habits. Most people like to believe their enemies exist outside them: rivals, critics, betrayal, bad luck. But Machiavelli understood a darker truth. The most dangerous enemies often live inside the individual himself. They appear as impulses, distractions, addictions to comfort, and patterns of behavior that quietly erode discipline. These weaknesses rarely look threatening at first. In fact, they often feel pleasant. They offer relaxation, temporary pleasure, or emotional escape. But over time, they become chains, binding the mind to mediocrity. A man does not collapse suddenly. He collapses slowly through 1,000 small indulgences that weaken his will. Look carefully at the habits that control most people's lives. Endless distraction, emotional reactions to minor frustrations, the constant search for comfort instead of growth. These behaviors feel harmless in isolation, but together they form a pattern of weakness. They train the mind to obey impulse instead of strategy. And once a person's mind begins obeying impulse, he becomes predictable. Predictable people are easy to manipulate, easy to outwork, easy to defeat. Machiavelli admired rulers who demonstrated ruthless discipline because he understood something fundamental about power. Control over others begins with control over oneself. If you cannot dominate your own habits, how can you expect to dominate circumstances? The execution of weak habits begins with brutal honesty. Most people avoid this stage because it forces them to confront uncomfortable truths. They prefer illusions about their discipline rather than examining their daily actions. But an unbreakable mind does not hide from self-analysis. It studies itself the way a strategist studies an enemy. Which habits weaken your focus? Which routines drain your energy? Which distractions steal hours of your life without producing anything valuable? Once these patterns become visible, you face a decision. You either continue feeding them or you eliminate them with precision. There is no middle ground. Weak habits do not coexist peacefully with strength. They undermine it slowly, quietly, until discipline collapses under their weight. This process requires something rare in modern culture: ruthless self-command. The ability to refuse comfort even when comfort is available. The ability to continue working when motivation disappears. The ability to control impulse long enough for long-term strategy to win. Most people rely on motivation, which is unstable and temporary. They feel inspired for a few days, perhaps a few weeks, and then they drift back into old routines. The disciplined mind operates differently. It does not wait for motivation. It builds systems that enforce behavior regardless of mood. Routine replaces emotional decision-making. Structure replaces chaos. Over time, these routines become stronger than temptation itself. Another dark truth emerges here as well. Most people will not support your transformation. They may encourage it politely at first, but when your discipline becomes visible, it threatens them. Your consistency highlights their inconsistency. Your focus exposes their distractions. Without intending to, you become a mirror reflecting their own weaknesses. And many people resent that mirror. Some will attempt to pull you back toward comfort. Others will criticize your intensity. This is another test of discipline. The unbreakable mind does not slow down to protect the comfort of others. It continues moving forward quietly, without apology. Over time, the execution of weak habits produces something remarkable: internal authority. You trust your own mind because you know it obeys your commands. When you decide to act, you act. When you decide to stop, you stop. This reliability creates confidence far deeper than motivation ever could. You are no longer negotiating with your impulses, you are directing them. In the psychology of power, this is a crucial stage. A person who commands himself becomes extremely difficult to control externally. Pressure loses much of its influence because your behavior is governed by discipline, not by emotional fluctuation. Right now, anchor this principle into your identity. Go to the comments and write the phrase that marks this execution of weakness. Write, "My discipline destroys my weaknesses." When you write it, understand what you are committing to. You are no longer negotiating with habits that weaken you. You are eliminating them one by one until your daily behavior aligns with strength. Because once your habits obey your will, something deeper begins to form. A psychological fortress built from consistency, restraint, and ruthless self-command. And that fortress leads directly into the next lesson, the art of strategic patience, where time itself becomes your weapon and the impatient destroy themselves without your interference. Lesson number 6. The cruelty of patience. There is a form of power so cold that most people never develop it because it requires something modern minds have nearly lost: patience. Not the gentle patience of comfort, but the ruthless patience of strategy. The kind that watches events unfold without interference. The kind that waits while others destroy themselves through impatience. Machiavelli understood this deeply while studying the rise and collapse of rulers. Again and again, powerful men were not defeated by stronger enemies. They were defeated by their own urgency, their desire to act too quickly, their hunger for immediate victory. Impatience forced them to reveal their intentions before the moment was right. and once their intentions became visible, their enemies had time to respond. The impatient mind is predictable. It wants results now. It wants recognition now. It wants control immediately. This urgency exposes weakness, because when someone knows you cannot wait, they know exactly how to manipulate you. They delay, they provoke, they create obstacles designed to frustrate your urgency. Eventually, impatience turns into emotional reaction, and emotional reaction turns into mistakes. The strategic mind does the opposite. It slows down when others speed up. It observes when others rush forward. It understands that time itself can be used as a weapon. Look at the darker chapters of history, and you will see how patience quietly determined the outcome of entire empires. Generals who waited for the perfect moment to strike while their opponents exhausted themselves. Political operators who allowed rivals to expose their own corruption before stepping forward. Leaders who endured temporary humiliation while preparing a far more decisive victory. To the outside world, patience often looks like weakness. Critics accuse the patient individual of hesitation or lack of courage. But beneath the surface, something far more dangerous is happening. Strategy is unfolding. Machiavelli warned rulers about the temptation of premature action. Acting before conditions are favorable can destroy even the strongest position. The impatient man fights battles that do not need to be fought. He reveals his ambitions before they are protected. He creates enemies long before he has the power to defeat them. The patient strategist avoids these traps. He allows situations to mature. He gathers information while others argue. He waits until circumstances align in a way that makes success almost inevitable. When the moment finally arrives, his actions appear sudden and decisive, but they are the result of long preparation. This discipline requires emotional control as well. Waiting without losing focus is difficult for the undisciplined mind. Doubt begins to creep in. Pressure builds. The desire to prove yourself grows stronger with each passing moment. But the unbreakable mind understands something colder. Action is only powerful when it occurs at the right time. Moving too soon can destroy months or years of preparation. True patience is not inactivity, it is controlled readiness. You remain prepared to act instantly when the opportunity appears, but you refuse to force events prematurely. Over time, patience changes how you perceive challenges. Instead of reacting emotionally to obstacles, you begin viewing them as part of a longer process. Temporary setbacks lose their ability to disturb you. You know that time can shift situations dramatically. Alliances change. Information emerges. Opportunities appear where none seemed possible before. The impatient mind cannot see these possibilities because it is obsessed with immediate outcomes. The patient mind sees the larger pattern unfolding. This perspective creates a form of strategic cruelty. You allow time to weaken your opponents without direct confrontation. While they exhaust themselves through constant action, you conserve energy and sharpen your understanding. Eventually, the moment arrives when their strength has eroded and your preparation is complete. The move you make then is not reckless aggression, it is inevitability. Right now, anchor this discipline into your thinking. Go to the comments and write the phrase that represents this cold patience. Write, "Time is my weapon." When you write it, remember what it means. You are no longer rushing into battles that do not need to be fought. You are no longer reacting to every provocation. You are learning to let time expose weakness while you prepare your strategy. Because when patience becomes part of your mind, you stop competing with the impatient. You outlast them, you outthink them, and eventually you outmaneuver them. And from this patience emerges the next lesson, one even darker than the last. The lesson of psychological armor, where criticism, betrayal, and hostility lose their ability to penetrate your mind. Lesson number 7. The armor of indifference. There is a stage in the construction of an unbreakable mind where something unsettling begins to happen. The opinions of others start losing their power over you. At first, this feels unnatural because most people are conditioned from childhood to seek approval. Society trains individuals to care deeply about how they are perceived, whether they are liked, respected, admired, or accepted. Entire lives are built around this fragile desire. People change their behavior to avoid criticism. They soften their ambitions to remain agreeable. They silence their instincts to maintain approval from those around them. Machiavelli understood this weakness well. He observed how rulers lost authority the moment they became obsessed with being loved, because the need for approval makes a person predictable, and predictability invites manipulation. The unbreakable mind learned something darker. Approval is a currency controlled by others. The moment you depend on it, you surrender control of your behavior. If praise excites you too much, you can be flattered into submission. If criticism wounds you too deeply, you can be intimidated into silence. In both cases, your mind is no longer your own. It becomes a puppet responding to external reactions. This is why psychological armor must be forged. An armor built not from arrogance, but from indifference. When praise and criticism lose their ability to disturb you, your mind becomes far more stable than the environment around it. History repeatedly shows the consequences of emotional dependence on public opinion. Leaders who tried to satisfy everyone ended up satisfying no one. Commanders who feared criticism hesitated in moments that demanded decisive action. Even brilliant strategists collapsed because they could not tolerate the hostility directed toward them. Machiavelli warned that power often requires decisions that will anger people. The ruler who cannot endure hatred will never make those decisions. He will hesitate, compromise, and weaken his position until his authority disappears. The ruler who accepts hostility as part of leadership becomes far more difficult to control. Psychological armor begins with a harsh realization. People's opinions are rarely objective. They are shaped by jealousy, fear, insecurity, personal interest, and limited understanding. Someone may criticize you not because you are wrong, but because your progress threatens their self-image. Another may praise you not because they admire you, but because they hope to gain something from you later. When you begin seeing these motivations clearly, the emotional weight of opinions fades. You stop interpreting reactions as truths about your worth. Instead, you see them as reflections of the person expressing them. Over time, this indifference becomes liberating. The mental energy once spent worrying about perception becomes available for strategy and growth. Instead of constantly evaluating how others might judge your actions, you focus on the quality of the actions themselves. Your decisions become clearer because they are no longer distorted by the fear of criticism. Your ambitions become sharper because they are not softened by the need for approval. This is why Machiavelli believed rulers must sometimes choose respect over love. Love is unstable. It shifts with mood, circumstance, and personal interest. Respect, especially the respect created by emotional stability, endures longer. When people see that your mind cannot be shaken by praise or hostility, they begin treating you differently. They recognize that influence cannot be gained through simple emotional pressure. Right now, anchor this armor into your identity. Go to the comments and write the phrase that represents this independence. Write, "Opinions do not control me." When you write it, understand the transformation it represents. You are stepping away from the fragile need for approval that weakens most minds. You are building a psychological barrier that protects your focus, your decisions, and your direction. Because once your mind becomes indifferent to external noise, it becomes far more difficult to manipulate. Criticism cannot break it. Praise cannot seduce it. Social pressure cannot redirect it. And from this armor emerges the next lesson, the darkest realization of all, understanding the true nature of human behavior and learning how to navigate it without illusions. Lesson number 8, the dissection of human nature. There comes a moment in the development of an unbreakable mind when innocence must die. It is not a dramatic moment. There is no announcement, no ceremony. It happens quietly, through observation, through watching how people behave when pressure appears, through noticing how quickly loyalty dissolves when circumstances change, through realizing that the stories society tells about human goodness often collapse when ambition, fear, or self-interest enters the room. Machiavelli reached this realization centuries ago while studying rulers, conspiracies, and betrayals. He saw a pattern so consistent that he wrote it plainly. People are generally ungrateful, fickle, deceptive, and driven by their own advantage. This statement unsettles many minds because it strips away comforting illusions. But the strategic mind does not seek comfort, it seeks accuracy. The majority of people move through life assuming others think the same way they do. If they are loyal, they assume loyalty will be returned. If they are honest, they assume honesty exists around them. This projection of personal values onto others creates vulnerability, because human nature is far more complex than simple virtue. People are capable of kindness, but they are also capable of betrayal. They are capable of loyalty, but that loyalty often survives only while it remains convenient. When circumstances shift, when power, money, survival, or reputation becomes threatened, behavior changes quickly. The unprepared mind experiences this as shock. The prepared mind recognizes it as part of the human pattern. To understand power, you must begin studying people the way a strategist studies terrain. Observe their motivations. Watch how they react when their interests are challenged. Notice how easily opinions shift when personal benefit is involved. This is not cynicism, it is awareness. Machiavelli believed rulers who ignored the darker side of human nature placed themselves in constant danger. A leader who assumes everyone is loyal becomes vulnerable to betrayal. A strategist who assumes honesty becomes vulnerable to deception. The individual who accepts human complexity, however, becomes far more difficult to manipulate. One of the darkest truths you will encounter is that most people act primarily from self-interest. This does not mean they are evil. It means survival instincts are deeply rooted in human psychology. When people believe their security, status, or advantage is threatened, they often choose self-preservation over loyalty. Friendships fracture, alliances collapse, promises lose their meaning. History is filled with examples of trusted allies turning into enemies when circumstances changed. Entire political systems have collapsed because loyalty was built on emotion rather than shared interest. Understanding this principle allows you to navigate relationships with greater clarity. Instead of blindly trusting words, you begin evaluating incentives. Why is this person loyal? What do they gain from maintaining this alliance? What might cause their behavior to change? These questions remove the naivety that leaves many people exposed. When you analyze motivations instead of assuming virtue, you can predict behavior far more accurately. Another element of human nature that Machiavelli studied closely is the influence of perception. People rarely judge reality objectively, they judge appearances. Reputation, image, and narrative often shape decisions more strongly than truth itself. A person who understands this dynamic gains an advantage in social environments. While others obsess over proving their intentions, the strategic mind focuses on shaping perception carefully, because in the psychology of influence, perception often determines power. But perhaps the most important transformation occurs when you stop taking behavior personally. Once you understand human nature, betrayal loses its shock. Deception loses its mystery. You begin seeing patterns instead of isolated incidents. A person who lies to protect their reputation is following a predictable instinct. A rival who undermines you to advance their position is acting according to ambition. When these actions occur, you no longer react with outrage or disbelief. You adjust your strategy. This shift does not require you to become cold toward everyone around you. It requires you to become realistic. You can appreciate loyalty while still understanding its limits. You can respect honesty while still preparing for deception. This balanced awareness prevents emotional collapse when reality reveals its harsher side. Instead of feeling betrayed by human behavior, you simply adapt to it. Over time, this understanding produces a form of psychological clarity. You begin identifying who can be trusted under pressure and who cannot. You recognize which alliances are based on mutual interest and which are based on temporary convenience. You see through flattery more easily. You detect manipulation before it fully unfolds. This awareness becomes one of the most powerful defenses in the psychology of power. Right now, anchor this lesson into your thinking. Go to the comments and write the phrase that represents your commitment to clarity. Write, "I study human nature." When you write it, remember what it means. You are choosing awareness over illusion. You are refusing to be blindsided by behavior that history has demonstrated countless times. Because once you understand the deeper patterns of human behavior, your decisions become sharper, your expectations become realistic, your strategy becomes stronger. And from this clarity emerges the next lesson, the construction of inner sovereignty, where your identity no longer depends on the chaos of the world around you. Lesson number 9, the throne of inner sovereignty. At some point in the construction of an unbreakable mind, a final shift begins to take place. It is not visible to the outside world, but internally it is monumental. The individual stops looking outward for direction and begins ruling from within. This is the birth of inner sovereignty. Machiavelli wrote extensively about princes and rulers who governed cities and empires, but the deeper principle hidden within his philosophy is this: the most powerful throne a person can ever claim is the one inside his own mind. Without that throne, every external victory remains fragile. Because if your identity depends on the approval of others, the stability of circumstances, or the comfort of familiar structures, then your power can be taken away the moment those things disappear. Most people never reach this stage because their sense of self is built on unstable foundations. They rely on titles, reputation, relationships, and social acceptance to define who they are. These things feel solid while they exist, but they are temporary by nature. Titles can be removed, reputations can be damaged, relationships can dissolve. Entire social structures can collapse overnight. History is full of examples of powerful figures who lost everything when the system supporting them fell apart. Kings were dethroned, generals were abandoned by their armies, advisors were exiled by the same rulers they once served. When identity is tied to external structures, its stability becomes as fragile as those structures themselves. Machiavelli observed that rulers who depended entirely on fortune often collapsed when fortune turned against them. Fortune, in his philosophy, represents the unpredictable forces of life: chance, circumstance, the shifting alliances of politics, the unexpected storms that disrupt even the most carefully planned strategy. The ruler who built his power entirely on favorable conditions was always vulnerable. But the ruler who cultivated internal strength could survive even when fortune changed direction. Inner sovereignty is the modern equivalent of this principle. When your identity is rooted in internal discipline rather than external advantage, adversity becomes far less destructive. This shift produces a profound calmness. When you understand that your responsibility lies primarily in governing your own reactions, thoughts, and actions, the unpredictable behavior of the world becomes less disturbing. You prepare for uncertainty instead of resisting it. You adapt quickly because your identity does not collapse when circumstances change. Others may panic when their expectations are shattered, but the sovereign mind remains stable because it was never built on fragile assumptions. There is also a darker independence that develops during this stage. When your identity becomes self-governed, the need for validation fades even further. You no longer require constant confirmation that your path is correct. You no longer depend on the approval of crowds to maintain confidence. Your direction comes from internal clarity rather than external applause. This independence can feel isolating to those who are not accustomed to it, but it is also liberating. Decisions become cleaner, focus becomes sharper, the noise of public opinion loses much of its influence. Over time, this inner sovereignty creates a psychological fortress. Criticism cannot dismantle it. Praise cannot inflate it. Loss cannot erase it. Success cannot corrupt it. Your sense of identity remains anchored in something far deeper than circumstance. This stability allows you to navigate volatile environments with remarkable composure. While others fluctuate emotionally with every shift in fortune, you remain grounded. It also produces a certain quiet authority. People instinctively sense when someone is internally governed rather than externally controlled. They recognize the difference between confidence built on ego and confidence built on discipline. The sovereign individual does not need to announce his strength. His presence communicates it. Decisions come from clarity instead of desperation. Reactions remain measured instead of impulsive. This stability becomes a subtle but powerful form of influence. Right now, anchor this sovereignty within your thinking. Go to the comments and write the phrase that represents your independence. Write, "I rule my own mind." When you write it, remember what it represents. You are claiming responsibility for your inner world. You are refusing to let external chaos define your identity. Because once the throne of your mind belongs to you, the world loses its ability to dictate who you are. And that realization prepares you for the final lesson, the ultimate transformation where the unbreakable mind becomes something more than resilient. It becomes untouchable. Lesson number 10, the ascension into an untouchable mind. At the end of this path, something unsettling happens. The person who began this journey is no longer the same. The illusions that once shaped their thinking have been stripped away one by one. Comfort no longer seduces them. Noise no longer distracts them. Opinions no longer control them. Pain no longer weakens them. The mind that emerges from this process is something different from the ordinary mind that walks through the world seeking approval and safety. It becomes colder, sharper, more disciplined, and above all, more difficult to break. This is the final stage Machiavelli's philosophy quietly points toward, the construction of a mind that cannot be easily controlled by fear, manipulation, or circumstance. Most people spend their lives reacting to criticism, reacting to pressure, reacting to setbacks and emotional storms. Their direction changes with every external force that pushes against them. A single insult can ruin their day. A single failure can weaken their confidence. A single moment of rejection can reshape their entire perception of themselves. They are not governing their lives, they are responding to them. But the individual who has absorbed the previous lessons begins operating differently. Reaction slowly gives way to control. Instead of moving with the chaos around them, they begin moving through it with deliberate intention. This transformation does not mean life suddenly becomes easy. In fact, the world remains just as unpredictable as it always was. Betrayal still exists. Competition still exists. Failure still appears without warning. The difference is that these forces no longer dominate the individual's psychology. The unbreakable mind sees adversity as a condition of existence rather than a personal attack. When something goes wrong, it is analyzed instead of mourned. When someone attempts manipulation, it is recognized instead of feared. This emotional distance creates a form of resilience that most people never experience. One of the darkest truths about mental strength is that it separates you from the majority. As your discipline grows stronger, you begin noticing how fragile most minds actually are. You see how easily people panic when plans collapse. You see how quickly anger controls their behavior. You see how desperately they chase approval from strangers. This awareness can feel isolating at first. The patterns become so obvious that it becomes difficult to ignore them. But this clarity is also empowering, because once you understand these patterns, they stop influencing your decisions. Another transformation occurs in how time is perceived. The average mind sees life in short bursts. Today's frustration, tomorrow's opportunity, next week's uncertainty. The unbreakable mind begins thinking in longer arcs, years instead of days, strategy instead of impulse, Temporary setbacks lose their emotional intensity because they are placed within a much larger timeline. What feels like defeat in a moment may simply be preparation for a future advancement.